What's up guys, it's MTGMatt for you, and today I'm going to show you some cards you should be most excited about for the upcoming Ikoria expansion, and which I'm also really excited about. I've been trying to think about, what does this expansion offer in terms of like archetypes or deck building possibilities and so on. So here's my take on that. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you do so, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. Would really appreciate that. And we jump right into there with Mutate. So these are all the mythic rare Mutate creatures, which are all obviously pretty powerful. Now, I deliberately present you those creatures this way because I think that the three creatures in the middle, Vadrock, Nefroy, and Illuna, are the most powerful ones you should look out for, and which I think also going to be very fun to build decks around. And while Snap decks and Brokos also both very powerful, like no doubt about that, I just think that their effects are just a bit more boring, and this video is about, being exciting about cards, and Snap decks and Brokos are really powerful, like don't get me wrong, but I think that the effects of the other three cards are just so much cooler, like Nefroy, pulling out a lot of creatures from the graveyard onto the battlefield is great. Vadrock gives you repeated value for non-creature cards from your graveyard also, and then Illuna just gives you, it puts permanent cards from the library onto the battlefield. So I think those three are really cool. Certainly those are going to enable some cool mutate decks, so look out for those cards. And let me actually turn on the lights here. I think that's better. And yeah, I'm really excited about those three, especially Nefroy I like a lot, and Illuna I think also really cool. Next up we got the ultimatums. So there are 5 ultimatums in the game, or are going to be in the game, and I've chosen these 3 because I think the other 2 ultimatums are not as powerful, and also their effects are not that exciting simply. I think Genesis Ultimatum is really cool. If you build your deck around it, you can get up to 5 permanent cards from library onto the battlefield, really powerful. Ruinous Ultimatum is just a game ender, basically destroys all of your opponent's board except for their lands. I think Ruinous Ultimatum is going to be especially powerful in Fiery Invention, Pharaoh of Wishes, Grixis control decks. I'm actually not looking forward to playing against that, but I think that's going to happen. And then Eerie Ultimatum is really cool. First, the effect is really powerful. Return n number of permanent cards with different names from a graveyard to the battlefield. And it also encourages you to build kind of Highlander decks where you have a lot of different cards in the deck, which is just, I think, really cool. So those 3 ultimatums are the ones I'm most excited about, so look out for them. Next up, we've got these 2 Planeswalkers here. We've got Luca and Vivian, both of which I think are really cool value engines. Especially Vivian with her like passive ability. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library. And then for both of them, they have this -2 ability, which is pretty similar, except that so both -2 abilities make it so that you can card a creature card from your library and put it onto the battlefield. With Vivian, it's lesser converted mana cost when you cast the next creature spell this turn, and with Luca, it's with higher converted mana cost when you exile a target creature you control. I think the Luca one is actually more easy to pull off, because you can simply have already a creature on board, then cast this on turn 5, and then get immediate value, whereas with Vivian you still need to have mana left to actually use her ability. But both of those Planeswalkers I think are really cool. They are value engines in creature focused decks, which is great because those usually struggle with having enough cards in hand. So I really like those cards here. Yeah, be excited for those. Next up we got the 3-color enchantment cycle, so to say. There are actually 5 of them, but the 5th one I cover on another slide basically. So we have Titan's Nest, Song of Creation, Death Aces, and Offspring's Revenge. Again, I deliberately presented it this way because I think that Offspring's Revenge is the least powerful of all those 4 enchantments. But I think, especially Song of Creation, you know, encourages you to build a crazy deck around it. I don't know how you would do it yet, but there's certainly a lot of possibilities with this card. And then Death Oasis is just really cool with like a Golgari graveyard style of deck. Titan's Nest is the same, and they just give you different effects here. And especially I think Death Oasis has some merit in graveyard types of decks. Titan's Nest I'm not so sure about because, as I already said in the card review, that adding generic mana in a 3-colored deck where you will have multicolored creature spells is kind of you know, harder to utilize than, for example, in a monocolor deck. But anyway, I think it's still very powerful. So those are really cool enchantments. I really like those, so look out for them. Next up, we've got the Cycling Archetype. Now, this one I really like, mostly because of Unpredictable Cyclone. I think that's just a crazy janky card. I love it, which enables you to think of some in different scenarios. So, for example, I already thought about cheating out maybe like a 1000-Year Storm with Unpredictable Cyclone, where you, let's say, cycle an Ominous Seas, which you see on the right, and then you hit a 1000-Year Storm and go crazy with that. Really cool. Now, all of these cards encourage you to build a deck around cycling. Riel, the Everwild, lets you draw more cards if you cycle, because when you cycle you discard cards. So it's like a value engine. Hidaro, the Wandering Monster, gives you that big payoff when you've cycled him 4 more times. You get an 8/8 trample with haste for cycling 2, which is great, and which I think you can consistently pull off in the right deck. Reptilian Reflection is just solid, I would say. 5/4 with trample and haste for 3 mana is also pretty good. And then Omnis Seas is also just cool. If you have multiple of those on the battlefield, you can repeatedly create 8/8 Kraken creature tokens, which is pretty powerful. So I think this type of deck is going to be a lot of fun. And please don't forget that I'm just presenting you cards from Ikoria here. Obviously, in standard, you have already a lot more cards you can combine with these cards to make like a powerful deck. So I think that's going to be really cool. And while we're on the topic of cycling, I've got a neat little slide here for you. I looked for all the cards in Ikoria which have a cycling cost of 1 or 2 generic mana, because I think just because of Unpredictable Cyclone, those cards can actually be good just to trigger Unpredictable Cyclone and get crazy value off of it. So that's why I put all these cards on the slides here. They have a generic cycling cost of 1 or 2 mana. And you basically have, I think, every card type here except for Planeswalkers. So you can cycle artifacts, sorceries, instants, and creatures. You can obviously cycle also lands, but I didn't put them on here because Unpredictable Cyclone doesn't trigger off of land cycling. So basically, except for Planeswalkers, you can cheat out any card type with Unpredictable Cyclone if you use one of these cards to trigger that. And I think that gives you some, you know, crazy possibilities. For some, I think one of the most obvious ones is You cycle a sorcery card and then you hit an ultimatum and boom, you basically cheated out an ultimatum for 1 or 2 mana, which is crazy, and you draw a card. And yeah, that's really cool stuff. So maybe this list helps you. It will certainly help me as a reference. And yeah. Next up, we got the non-creature spell decks, and basically these are the 4 cards from Ikoria that would support that deck type. So we've got the Sprite Dragon, I think really powerful 2-drop with flying and haste, and which grows over time the more non-creature spells you cast. Shark Typhoon, very expensive enchantment, but you could also cheat this out if you combine like a cycling with a non-creature type of spell deck. And gives you repeated shark tokens, which is really cool. And they have flying, which is really powerful. And now Whirlwind of Thought is the 5th 3-color enchantment spell that I put in here in the slide because very obvious. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, draw a card. Can be pretty powerful for that deck if you build it a bit controlly, because the turn comes down, it's 4 mana, do nothing. And yeah, then we've got another set of the Ancient Way, the 3rd Planeswalker in the set, which is, I think, really cool. You probably want to make it so that you proliferate here to make sure you get that juicy emblem. So also certainly a fun deck archetype to think of, and I'm also really excited for this one. Next up, I've made a slide here with power creeps, which didn't really fit into a certain deck archetype. Maybe, of course, Fiend Artisan fits into like graveyard type of decks. But I put both of these here because I think both are really, really powerful just by themselves. And Fiend Artisan can tutor out a creature for you. It can just be also a huge creature for just 2 mana. I mean, in the right deck, this can easily be 2 mana, 5/5 or 6/6 or even bigger. And Luminous Broodmoth is also just very powerful. I think you can put a Luminous Broodmoth in like white weenie aggressive decks to protect yourself against board wipes. And watch out for those cards, certainly very powerful. Next up, yeah, we've got archetypes that support certain keywords, and this one is the Trample archetype, which would mainly be carried by Quartzwood Crasher, which is a 5-mana 6/6 Trampler in blue colors, and who creates dinosaur creature tokens for you with Trample for the amount of damage your creatures deal to your opponent in the turn, which is pretty powerful, can snowball. And then we have these other 3 cards. I think especially Proud Wildbonder is specifically designed to go with Quartzwood Crusher. And then the other 2, Almighty Brushwhack is just a 1-drop with Trample. We, I think, don't really have in the game right now. And then the Hornbash Mantor is that human who gives +1/+1 counters on each creature you control with Trample. I don't think it's really good, but I just wanted to put it in there just for the sake of, completeness. So that Trample is like one keyword you could build around. Yeah, next up, obviously, given the lore and everything, we've got the Human Tribal deck here. And I looked up the cards that would, I think, most support this kind of deck. Obviously, we've got General Kudro, which is legendary creature. Gives the humans +1/+1. And then has some additional utility. You can destroy your opponent's creatures, exile target cards from your opponent's graveyard. Certainly just a solid card. Then Sanctuary Lockdown goes very well with Swallow Whole, because Sanctuary Lockdown you can tap one of your opponent's creatures and then exile it with Swallow Whole, which is really cool. Dire Tactics is a very powerful card. You exile target creature for 2 mana, and you have no downside if you control a human, which should be very easy in a Human Tribal deck, obviously. Then we've got Generous Enforcer, which I think is actually pretty bad, but maybe it's an option for a 2-drop here. Whisper Squad is just, I think, a great 1-drop that reloads your battlefield, because you probably want to play very aggressive and have like command type of effects where all the humans get +1/+1. We obviously already have General Kudrow, Sanctuary Lockdown. You even have more options, for example, with what's it called? Icon of Ancestry. Or what I had thought about is maybe you could make a mix of like a human knight tribal deck, because most of the knights are also human, and then you put in your, what's it called? You put in your legendary artifact from Throne of Eldraine that gives all your creatures +1/+1. So a lot of options there, and I think also something I'm excited about. I just love tribal decks. Now we can't know yet if it's going to be good. Also, something to note is Lava-Bring Venturer, which can be very evasive to your opponent's effects. So these are the cards I have for you for the human tribal. Next up, we got a Flash archetype that's supported with this expansion, mainly carried by Slitherwisp, which is this 3-mana 2/2 that lets you draw a card and your opponent loses 1 life whenever you cast a spell with Flash. And then we have Cunning Nightbonder and Sea Dasher Octopus that I think support this archetype really well. So that's something, that's a deck building idea, another one that you can think of here. And then another one for another keyword here is the Menace archetype, mainly carried by Labyrinth Raptor, I would say. And then we've got Hunted Nightmare and Sonorous Howlbonder to support that. Menace is actually a pretty good keyword, I would say, and you can certainly find more support from the current card pool in Standard. So watch out for these cards, especially for Labyrinth Raptor and Hunted Nightmare. And then, yes, companion cards. Now, there are 10 companion cards in total. I've listed the 4 here, which I'm most excited about, because I think these cards are the ones that are either most realistic to actually build a deck around for the requirement, or just simply put them into your deck as like playing creatures and use them for their like passive abilities. So I think that Lures of the Dream Den, you probably do not want to fulfill the companion requirement, but even if you do, it gives you really good value, and even if you don't, I think it just gives you some real nice value. And then Zero the Dawnwaker is very interesting for decks which use a lot of activated abilities, especially because those activated abilities don't necessarily have to be on creature cards. They can be on even like on enchantments, artifacts, and so on. So really cool. Gigantha the Wellspring, I think the companion requirement is fairly easy to fulfill actually. And then you basically get a 5-mana 5/5, which is a mana rock. Probably is nice to play in a 3-color deck to give you more mana and help fix your mana base. And then I think of those 4, Kahira, the Orphan Guard, is probably the most powerful one, because I think on the one hand, the companion requirement is pretty easy to do if you, for example, play an elemental deck. And even if you don't, I think you could use this just as like a nice commander type card. And maybe this even supports the Vigilance keyword archetype, which is also in this expansion. So I like Kahira here the most, and just in general, I think the companion keyword is a great idea because it encourages you to like really think outside the box in deck building. Next up, we got the Bonding archetype, and mainly supported by Winota, Journey of Forces. I think Winota is a really cool card, which I'm very excited about and want to try out. Now, we don't know yet if it's going to be super powerful. Probably not, because humans, I think, in general, tend to be not that big of creatures and not that powerful. But if there is a card that supports this like bonding archetype, it's going to be this card. And then as you can see with the other cards, they are more like all over the place. I think especially Of One Mind in blue is so random. And Kola the Titan Ape, in mine it has this activate ability where it can get indestructible, but I just put him in here for the sake of completeness. I don't think that Kogla itself like really supports this bonding archetype. It's more or less for most of the parts Winota as Fighters 1. And but just like from the flavor, I think that's really cool idea. And so look out for Winota and Fighters 1. And now here's the main part, or that has been the main part basically of what I'm most excited about for this expansion. And I want to give you some deck building ideas already. And now I have some cards which are just some honorable mentions, which didn't really fit into some category, but which I think you should look out for and consider when you're building decks, because those can also be really interesting and really powerful. So let's take a look at them. First up, we've got the Ozolith. Yeah, this legendary artifact, which lets you basically store all the counters you put on your creatures throughout the game, which really enables you more to build your own creatures and store some value. I even read this idea in like a Reddit post, I think, that if you have the Ozolith on the battlefield and you have a Elspeth Conqueror's Death, the enchantment, if Elspeth Conqueror's Death returns a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, you can actually choose to give the creature a loyalty counter. And then, wait. And then the creature has a loyalty counter. If it dies, the Ozolith gets a loyalty counter. And actually doesn't matter, because you can move these counters only on creatures and not planeswalkers. So forget everything I said. But basically, I think a very cool card. And even for +1/+1 counters can, you know, acquire huge value over the course of the game if put in the right deck. So look out for the Ozolith. Next I've got Weaponize the Monsters, this 1 mana enchantment red. It's probably a nice fit in Rakdos sacrifice decks. I think that it could be really powerful, so watch out for this card. Next up, Heartless Act. Yeah, I think this one is probably really good. You're going to see it in a lot of decks. For me, it's basically 2 mana instant destroy target creature, because I don't think it's that often the case the creatures have counters on them. Now, I could be wrong with the upcoming expansion, but I actually doubt that. I think probably in the first month or so, where people are going to be experimenting a lot, that might be the case, but then when the meta settles, I think it's going to be less frequent. So, and then its Heartless Act is just such an efficient way to remove creatures from your opponent. Also has some flexibility with the second option, so watch out for this card. And then, yeah, we've got Mythos of Nifroil. So there are 5 Mythos cards in Ikoria. I like this one the most because if you play it in a specific 3-color deck, it's 3 mana, destroy target non-land permanent, very efficient. It's not quite an Assassin's Trophy, but comparably good, so I think that one is great too. And yeah, now here we have Reconnaissance Mission, 4 mana enchantment in blue, which is quite expensive, but it has an immediate effect. The turn comes down if you have creatures on board. You can immediately draw cards with this, and I think if you put this like in a Zorius Flyers deck, you have such a huge value, because your flying creatures usually connect really easily with your opponent's face. And let's say on turn 4, you have 3 flyers on board, your opponent can't block these. You put this down and you immediately draw 3 cards, which is huge value, and you can get repeated value of this. So Great card, and even if you don't need it, you can cycle it away. So, great little card here. Next up, Footfall Creator. Yeah, this one was a favorite of mine in card reviews. This small little enchant land aura in red, which gives target creature trample and haste on the end of turn, and you can cycle it for one. And I just think that the effect is so good in a lot of decks. Just trample and haste for basically 1 mana repeatedly, and fairly hard to remove also because it's on enchantment. I think it's a really cool card. Yeah, watch out for this one. And then, yeah, this one is actually a really powerful one. Bastion of Remembrance, 3 mana enchantment black. It gives you a token, and then in the right deck, it just can drain your opponent so fast, and it just makes it really bad for your opponent to remove your board with, let's say, a Shattering the Sky. If this is on the battlefield, because you're going to gain so much life, your opponent is going to lose so much life. It's just really a pain in the ass in, like, let's say, Ores of Sacrifice decks or black aggro decks. Like, you can fit these in a lot of decks, and really powerful card. Then Lead the Stampede, not like a super exciting card, but I think in decks where you basically want to go wide, you have a lot of creatures in your deck that maybe not have that high like converted mana costs, and you have a lower land count in your deck than usual, maybe like 22 lands or even just 20 lands. Your opponent wipes your board, you pay a Lead the Stampede, and like get 3, 4, 5 cards back. I think that's really powerful, and definitely consider this card for these types of decks. And then your Bondless Enclave, card which you basically put in creature-heavy decks with big creatures, and then lets you draw a card for 4 mana repeatedly, which I think is really, really good. Gives you card advantage over time, which creature decks struggle with. So I think a great little land card here. And it doesn't come into play tapped, so just the turn comes down, you can use it to tap for generic mana. And then we've got Ram Through, I think, which is an excellent removal spell in green and its instant speed, which we actually rarely see. And then it has this upside with Trample synergy also. So in those Trample keyword decks, this could be really good, I think. And then, yeah, Sleeper Dart. Now, I mentioned this card only because of Doom Foretold decks, but I think specifically in Doom Foretold decks, this is a nice alternative to, I would say, Gilded Globe, and it's better than Gilded Globe. Also 2 mana artifact that lets you draw a card, and then you have this option of protecting you from the creature your opponent has by sacrificing it. So I think for specifically those decks, this card is pretty cool. Then I think we are almost at the end. Escape Protocol, also is support for cycling decks. If you have creatures with enter the battlefield effects or artifacts, can get additional value out of them. Now, my gut feeling says this actually is not going to be pretty powerful, but I simply want to mention it because I think it's interesting, and maybe you find a way to use this. And then the last cards here I want to mention are Keensight Mentor and Duskfang Mentor. Both are these human clerics, which reward you basically if your deck has creatures with a certain keyword on them. And I specifically chose these 2 because I think those 2 are the most realistic to use. So Duskfang Mentor supports lifelink counters or lifelink, and Keensight Mentor vigilance. And I think especially Keensight Mentor with vigilance can be really good. It's, I think, easier to give all the creatures vigilance than it's to give you all the creatures lifelink. And you could like have a Keensight Mentor on turn 3. Turn 4 you put down the Johnny Planeswalker. All your creatures have vigilance, and then you can easily give all those creatures +1/+1 counters. So yeah, I think those 2 could be kept in mind just for deck building ideas. And that's my take on that. And these are all the cards I'm most excited about for Ikoria Lair of Behemoths. Only 4 days left, basically, if you watch this on April 12th. And I'm really excited about this expansion. I hope you're too. And I see you guys on next video.